Gregory Peck was not just one of Hollywood's most respected actors. He was a symbol of decency, dignity, and compassion both on screen and in real life. For millions around the world, he was Atticus Finch, the quiet hero who believed that courage was not a man with a gun in his hand, but someone who knows he is licked before he begins, and begins anyway. But long before he became a cinematic legend, Gregory Peck was a young man trying to find meaning, purpose, and love in a world that felt uncertain and unforgiving. And in the middle of fame, pressures, and personal heartbreak, he would discover a love story so powerful that it transformed not only his life, but the very legacy he would leave behind. Gregory Peck once said, "I realize that love can come late, after heartbreak, but when it arrives, it is the greatest gift life can give." Few people knew what he meant when he said those words, but deep inside, he was speaking of one woman, Veronique Passani, the love who healed him, challenged him, and stood by him through every triumph and tragedy. Their love story was not loud, scandalous, or explosive, like many Hollywood romances. It was built quietly, with loyalty, patience, sacrifice, and respect, the kind of love that lasts a lifetime. To understand why their love was extraordinary, one must go back to Gregory Peck's childhood, long before the bright lights of Hollywood. Born elder Gregory Peck in 1916 in La Jolla, California, he grew up in a world shaken by economic hardship and emotional loneliness. His parents divorced when he was barely 6 years old, and little Gregory was shuffled between homes, raised partly by his grandmother and partly left to grow up on his own. Those early years left a mark on him. He learned very young what loss felt like and how deeply a child could crave stability and affection. His grandmother, Catherine, became his anchor, the strong, gentle woman who taught him about kindness and integrity. Gregory admired her deeply, and he would later say that the character of Atticus Finch was inspired partly by her unwavering moral strength. But when she passed away while he was still in high school, Gregory felt the world collapse around him once again. He had no money, very few plans, and no family structure to lean on. He was simply a boy with a fragile heart trying to survive. Yet destiny had other plans. He enrolled at UC Berkeley, initially to study medicine, but fate intervened when he stepped onto a theater stage for the very first time. Acting gave him something he never had before, not applause or admiration, but purpose. It taught him to transform pain into expression, loneliness into art, and vulnerability into strength. Soon after, he received a scholarship to the neighborhood playhouse in New York, and he left California with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. Life in New York was harsh. He worked odd jobs, waiter, guide, busboy, just to afford meals. And yet, something inside him kept burning, a quiet determination that told him not to give up. Auditions came, roles followed, and then something miraculous happened. Hollywood noticed. In 1944, he made his film debut in Days of Glory, and the industry instantly recognized a rare soul, a performer who didn't act with vanity or ego, but with sincerity and truth. Within his first 5 years of acting, Gregory Peck received 4 Academy Award nominations, an astonishing achievement almost unheard of in Hollywood. Audiences saw him as noble, honest, and courageous, and his roles reflected that image. But what the world could not see was that behind the strong and graceful man stood someone who was quietly fighting his own battles, particularly in his personal life. Before he ever met the woman who would change his life, Gregory Peck married a young Finnish woman named Greta Kukkonen in 1942. They shared early struggles together, building a family while Gregory's career grew rapidly. Greta was there before he was famous, before he was celebrated, before the world knew his name, and Gregory respected her deeply for it. They had 3 sons, Jonathan, Stephen, and Carrie, and for a long time, their marriage seemed strong and stable. But fame is a double-edged sword. Endless travel, long separations, dramatic roles, emotional intensity. Hollywood has pulled apart countless marriages, and Gregory's was no exception. By the early 1950s, cracks began to form quietly and painfully beneath the surface. Gregory was a man who believed deeply in commitment and family, and when his marriage began to fail, he was devastated. It was during this chapter of emotional turmoil that he met the woman who would become the love of his life. Her name was Veronique Passani, a French journalist working for the newspaper France Soir. She was intelligent, poised, elegant, and strong, someone who could look beyond fame and truly see the person inside. She first met Gregory when she was assigned to interview him in 1953, while he was filming Roman Holiday in Rome, alongside another legend, Audrey Hepburn. The story of their first meeting is almost cinematic. Veronique walked into the interview calm and composed, expecting just another conversation with the Hollywood star. But what she found instead was a man who spoke with depth, humility, and quiet intensity. Gregory was struck by her intelligence and grace. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, not dazzled by Hollywood, not intimidated by fame, not swayed by glamour. She asked thoughtful, serious questions about life, politics, world peace, and human responsibility. She spoke as though she wanted to understand the real man behind the camera, not the image painted by studios. Gregory later confessed that he felt an immediate connection, a spark he did not expect, especially during a time of emotional confusion. But he also knew he was still married, and he refused to act on feelings that might hurt others. Respectfully, they remained friends, though both felt something deeper. Yet fate is persistent when two souls are meant to find each other. Months later, Gregory returned to the United States, trying to repair his struggling marriage. But the emotional distance only grew. He felt torn between duty and truth, between keeping a promise and acknowledging a love he could no longer deny. Gregory Peck once said, "Sometimes the heart knows what the mind is afraid to speak," and for years, he carried that unspoken truth quietly inside him. Eventually, the marriage could no longer be saved. In 1955, Gregory Peck and Greta divorced after 13 years together, a decision that weighed heavily on him. He felt guilt, sorrow, and fear that he may have broken something that could never be repaired, fear that his children would suffer, and fear that the world would judge him harshly. And indeed, some did. Headlines were unkind, Hollywood whispered, critics speculated. But through the storm, Veronique remained calm and patient, refusing to rush or push. When Gregory needed space, she stepped back. When he needed support, she stood beside him silently, offering strength without expectation. And when he was finally ready to open his heart again, she was there, not as a replacement, but as a partner who truly saw him. Their love was not built on passion alone. It was built on understanding, respect, and an unshakable belief in each other. In 1955, 1 year after his divorce, Gregory and Veronique married in Paris, beginning a partnership that would last nearly 49 years, until the final moment of Gregory's life. Little did they know that they were about to embark on a journey filled not only with success and glamorous film premieres, but with struggles, tragedies, and moments that would reveal what real love truly means. Together, they would face grief, illness, professional hardship, and loss. And together, they would overcome every one of them. And soon, the world would witness something extraordinary: the transformation of Gregory Peck from a respected actor into a symbol of compassion, activism, and courage. With Veronique by his side, Gregory would fight for human rights, stand against racism, and speak publicly about justice at a time when doing so was not easy or safe. He would risk his career to advocate for equality, peace, and decency, not as a performance, but as a deeply personal choice. But behind every great act Gregory Peck ever made was the quiet strength of the woman who stood beside him, the love who believed in him more than he believed in himself. And their love would face its greatest test in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. Because even heroes encounter heartbreaks, even legends are touched by unimaginable pain, and even the strongest marriages must survive the darkest nights. Their story was just beginning. Gregory Peck's life entered a new chapter following his marriage to Veronique Passani in 1955. For the first time in many years, he felt a sense of peace, not the peace of silence, but the peace that comes from being understood, respected, and loved without conditions. With Veronique, Gregory found what he had been searching for since childhood: a true home. Not a house, not a place, not a temporary shelter, but a place where his heart could rest. Their marriage began in Paris, far away from Hollywood lights and curious eyes. They chose simplicity: no lavish displays, no extravagant celebrations, just love, vows whispered softly, and a quiet promise to walk through life side by side. After the ceremony, Gregory and Veronique stayed in Europe for several weeks, traveling through France and Italy like two ordinary people rather than celebrities. They walked hand in hand through cobblestone streets, enjoyed simple meals, talked for hours about dreams and fears, and found joy in being invisible to the world. Gregory later said that those days were some of the happiest of his entire life. He didn't feel like a movie star or a public figure. He felt like a man rediscovering the meaning of love. Veronique was the type of woman who didn't need spotlight or admiration. She preferred quiet spaces, meaningful conversations, and real connection. She listened deeply and spoke truthfully, and Gregory cherished the way she could comfort him without uttering a single word. When the couple eventually returned to the United States, life quickly changed pace. Hollywood greeted him with new film offers. Journalists wanted interviews, and fans wanted to see the star they admired. But Gregory was no longer just an artist working for fame. Something inside him had shifted. He wanted to use his platform to make a difference, to stand for fairness, to speak for those without a voice, to inspire hope. And with Veronique by his side, encouraging him, he stepped into the world not just as an actor, but as a humanitarian. In 1956, just 1 year after their wedding, Gregory and Veronique welcomed their first child together, a son named Anthony. Gregory held the tiny baby in his arms, overwhelmed by emotion. He felt both blessed and humbled. He had been a father before, but this moment felt different. It felt like a second chance, a chance to build a home filled not with chaos and silence, but with warmth, laughter, and unity. When his son wrapped little fingers around his father's thumb, Gregory's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "You will grow surrounded by love. I promise you." Veronique watched him with gentle admiration. She knew the scars he carried, the wounds left by childhood instability, by personal failure, and by loss, and she was determined that their home would be built on empathy, peace, and communication. She believed that pain could be transformed into wisdom, and she trusted Gregory completely. With his growing family in mind, Gregory Peck continued to build his career, and in 1962, he accepted a role that would change not only his professional life, but also the lives of millions of viewers. Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, based on Harper Lee's powerful novel, the film told the story of justice, morality, and courage in the face of racism. Gregory did not approach the role as just another character. He approached it as a mission. He read the script and instantly felt a deep connection. Atticus was not a hero with a sword or a cape. He was a quiet man who fought with integrity and truth. A father teaching his children to stand for what is right, even when standing alone. Gregory felt as though fate had led him to this moment. The values he believed in, personally fairness, compassion, dignity, were reflected perfectly in the character of Atticus, and he poured his heart into the performance. During filming, he often said that he felt his grandmother's presence, the woman who taught him decency and courage, guiding him. He believed she would have been proud. Veronique supported him through the emotional weight of the role, reminding him that the world needed voices that spoke against injustice. She often visited the set, bringing warmth and encouragement. She cooked meals for the crew, played with the children on set, and reminded Gregory that what he was doing mattered more than applause or awards. When To Kill a Mockingbird was released, it became a cultural phenomenon. Audiences sat in theaters in silence, moved to tears by the film's message. When Gregory, as Atticus, stood before the jury and delivered his speech pleading for fairness, the world listened. People saw not just an actor, they saw a man who believed every word he spoke. And when the credits rolled, many viewers said they walked out feeling changed. Inspired to see humanity differently, the role earned Gregory Peck the Academy Award for Best Actor, the Oscar he had been nominated for 5 times. But when he held the statue in his hands, he did not think of victory. He thought of responsibility. He said quietly that if the film helped even one person choose tolerance over hatred, then the award truly belonged to Harper Lee, to the story, and to the message. When he returned home that night, he found Veronique waiting for him, smiling softly. She kissed his forehead, touched the trophy gently, and whispered, "You didn't win this for acting, you won it for who you are." Those words meant more to him than any applause ever could. As the years passed, Gregory and Veronique built a life filled with love and purpose. They welcomed another child in 1970, daughter named Cecilia, and their family felt whole. Gregory cherished being a father, and he spent as much time as possible at home. He was strict about boundaries. Family dinners were sacred. Children's birthdays were never missed, and fame never came before family. While many Hollywood stars drowned in excess, scandals, and broken promises, Gregory fought fiercely to protect the peace inside his home. But no life, not even the most beautiful one, escapes heartbreak. In 1975, Gregory received devastating news that shattered him to his core. His eldest son from his first marriage, Jonathan, who had struggled privately with emotional battles, tragically took his own life at the age of 31. The world did not know the full details, and Gregory, heartbroken and grieving, chose silence over publicity. He was a man who believed deeply in privacy, dignity, and respect. The loss crushed him. Gregory fell into a darkness he had never known. Tormented by questions with no answers, he blamed himself, wondering if he could have done something differently as a father. Night after night, he sat awake, staring into the emptiness of grief. Tears silently falling. He felt guilt, regret, and helplessness, emotions so heavy they nearly suffocated him. But in those darkest days, Veronique became his strength. She held him when he trembled, listened when he needed to speak, and stayed silent when words were too fragile. She reminded him that love does not fix everything, but it helps you survive what cannot be fixed. She stood beside him like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship through a storm. Gregory later said that without Veronique, he might not have survived that chapter of his life. Her gentleness, patience, and quiet resilience saved him. She never tried to erase the pain. She simply walked through it with him, step by step, day by day. Together, they chose to turn tragedy into purpose. Gregory began advocating publicly for mental health awareness, suicide prevention, and emotional support for families who had suffered similar losses. He refused to let silence swallow grief. Instead, he used his platform to speak for those who could not speak for themselves. He reminded the world that behind every public figure, behind every success story, behind every smile there could be pain unseen. The world admired him, not because he was perfect, but because he was honest. He was not afraid to show vulnerability, to acknowledge grief, or to say, "I am hurting, but I am still standing." Through all of this, Veronique remained his partner, his courage, his quiet hero. Their love was no longer just romantic affection. It had become a deep, unbreakable bond. Even as Gregory's film career continued with successes like The Omen and MacArthur, he found himself drawn increasingly toward humanitarian work. He traveled around the world supporting charities, fighting hunger, raising awareness for global peace campaigns, and supporting civil rights. He refused to limit his influence to entertainment. He wanted his life to matter beyond the screen. He stood beside Martin Luther King Jr., marched for equality, and used his voice to encourage unity in a divided world. For speaking out, he received threats, criticism, and anger from those who felt uncomfortable. But he stood firm, and whenever doubt crept in, he looked to Veronique, who gently reminded him that courage means doing the right thing, even when you stand alone. As the decades passed, Gregory Peck and Veronique built a legacy not of glamour, but of love. They celebrated 50 years of marriage with a quiet dinner at home. No cameras, no reporters, no parties. just family, laughter, memories, and gratitude. Gregory held Veronique's hand, looked into her eyes, and said softly, "The greatest success of my life is loving you." But the journey was not over yet. The final years of Gregory Peck's life would reveal just how powerful their love truly was, and how far love can carry the human heart when everything else begins to fade. Because a time was coming when Gregory, the strong hero adored by millions, would grow weak, and when illness came quietly, like a thief in the night, it would be Veronique who proved what real love means. The kind of love that does not leave, that does not tremble, and that does not break. And the world would witness a love story that was not written in scripts or performed on stages, but lived every single day. A love story far more heroic than any movie ever made. As the years moved gently forward, Gregory Peck and Veronique continued to live life hand in hand, their bond only growing deeper with time. They had built a partnership grounded in trust, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. While Hollywood celebrated Gregory as one of the greatest actors of all time, those who knew him best understood that his true greatness lived not on screen, but at home. The quiet evenings spent reading with his children, in handwritten love notes left for Veronique, and in the humility with which he treated every person he met. Gregory once shared in an interview, "Fame is temporary, awards fade, but love is what remains when everything else disappears." He meant every word. He had lived long enough to know that lights dim, applause dies, and memories blur. But the feeling of truly being loved and truly loving someone is the one treasure that time cannot erase. During the 1980s and 1990 seconds, Gregory took fewer film roles, choosing instead to focus on what mattered most to him: family and meaningful work. He enjoyed quiet mornings with Veronique, simple walks through gardens, long dinners where conversations held more value than any red carpet event. His life slowed just enough to let him breathe, reflect, and savor every moment. He was a devoted father, especially to his youngest children, who grew up with a gentler version of the world than Gregory had known as a boy. He read bedtime stories, attended school plays, spoke at graduations, and felt a kind of joy that no stage could ever give him. And every night before he slept, he would turn to Veronique, the woman whose love had rebuilt his life after heartbreak, and whisper, "Thank you," because he never forgot how lucky he was to have found her. But just as life brings joy, it also brings moments that test the spirit. Gregory's health began to decline slowly, quietly, at first just fatigue, then shorter breaths, then the kind of weakness that makes a strong man hold onto walls as he walks. He was aging, and though he faced it with grace, time is a force that no one can resist. Veronique saw the changes before he ever spoke of them. She noticed the way his hands trembled slightly when he buttoned his shirt, the way he paused at the top of the stairs to catch his breath, the way he smiled through pain so their children wouldn't worry. She stood beside him, gentle and unwavering, becoming his strength just as he had once been hers. She arranged his medical appointments, stayed awake through long nights, read aloud to him when his eyes grew tired, and held his hand through every moment of fear. Gregory never complained. He did not believe in burdening others with his suffering. Instead, he focused on gratitude for the life he had lived, the family he had built, the love he had been blessed with, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. He often sat by the window, watching the sunlight move across the garden, thinking about the young boy who once felt so alone, wondering how life had taken him here, from struggle and loss, to a love grand enough to fill all the empty spaces inside him. As illness gradually weakened him, Gregory spoke more openly about the power of love. He said something profound to Veronique one evening while the two sat together watching an old film on television. He turned to her, his voice soft but steady, and whispered, "If I had to live everything again, every mistake, every heartbreak, every loss, I would, because it all led me to you." Tears filled Veronique's eyes. After nearly 5 decades of marriage, she still felt the same spark she felt the day she first met him as a journalist. Their love had never depended on perfection. It had survived storms because they had always chosen each other, even when life became difficult. In his final years, Gregory received tributes from around the world, lifetime achievement awards, humanitarian honors, public recognition for his work supporting civil rights, peace organizations, and countless charities. But when asked what he was most proud of, he never mentioned trophies or historic roles. He simply smiled, gestured toward his wife and children, and said, "This is my greatest achievement. My family, my marriage, my children." And those who heard him understood that behind one of Hollywood's most respected men stood a woman whose quiet strength shaped every chapter of his life. The last months were tender and sacred. Gregory spent them mostly at home, surrounded by the people he loved most. The house was filled with gentle laughter, shared memories, old photo albums spread across tables, and the comforting sound of music playing softly in the evenings. He loved classical pieces, gentle piano that felt like breathing, and Veronique often sat beside him, reading or simply holding his hand. Every day, she reminded him of joy. She brushed his hair, adjusted his pillows, helped him walk when he struggled, and whispered stories from their travels together: Paris, Rome, New York, Hollywood, memories that painted warmth over pain. She protected his dignity fiercely, never letting illness steal his pride. Their children often visited, sitting beside him, telling stories, singing songs, or simply sitting quietly. They didn't need words. Love speaks most powerfully in silence. One spring morning in 2003, the family gathered around Gregory's bedside. His breathing was slow, his body tired, his eyes gentle and peaceful. Veronique held his hand tightly, refusing to let go. She whispered that she loved him again and again, tears quietly falling onto their entwined fingers. Their children surrounded them, forming a circle of love that wrapped Gregory like a blanket. Gregory looked at Veronique, his eyes filled with gratitude more than fear. He whispered softly, "You saved my life," and with a final breath, he left this world the way he lived, with dignity, grace, and love in his heart. He was 87 years old. The world mourned deeply. Newspapers around the globe printed tributes. Fans placed flowers and letters outside theaters and on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. People cried not only because they had lost a brilliant actor, but because they felt they had lost a man who represented goodness, a man who showed what kindness looks like, a man who taught that courage is gentleness. But no heart broke harder than Veronique's. She had lost her best friend, the love of her life, her partner of nearly half a century. The pain was enormous, the kind of pain only great love can leave behind. For days she remained quiet, surrounded by family, holding on to memories like lifelines. Their home felt different without Gregory's laughter, without his steady footsteps, without his warm voice echoing through the halls. She visited his grave often, sitting for long hours, speaking to him like he was still beside her. And in a way, he was, because great love does not disappear. It remains in every breath, every morning sunbeam, every quiet night, every heartbeat. Years later, when she was asked what Gregory Peck meant to her, Veronique smiled through tears and said, "He was my hero not because he was famous, but because he was good. He loved deeply. He stood for what was right. He lived with honor, and he loved me with his whole heart." That is heroism. She carried his legacy forward by continuing the humanitarian work they once shared. She attended charity events, participated in community programs, and spoke about compassion, equality, and peace. She honored him not with statues or speeches, but through action, the same way he had lived. In time, Veronique found peace. She surrounded herself with her children and grandchildren, whose laughter filled the spaces where silence once sat. She kept Gregory present in stories, in photographs, in memories told around the dinner table. And every year on their anniversary, she lit a candle and whispered, "Thank you for loving me." Veronique passed away in 2012, almost a decade after Gregory, and was laid to rest beside him, united once more, side by side for eternity. Their love story remains one of Hollywood's most beautiful and most real. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. It survived fame, distance, tragedy, and time. It proved that real love is not measured by grand gestures or dramatic declarations. but by loyalty, patience, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand together in both sunshine and storm. Gregory Peck and Veronique Passani showed the world that heroism exists not only in films and scripted scenes, but in everyday acts of kindness and devotion. Their love was not loud, it was quiet, steady, and eternal. And long after audiences forget movie lines or golden statues grow dusty, their love story will continue to inspire hearts across generations. Because in the end, the greatest legacy anyone can leave behind is love. And Gregory Peck's greatest role was not Atticus Finch, Captain Ahab, or Abraham Lincoln. His greatest role was being a husband, a father, a man who loved and was loved with extraordinary devotion.